is a question scientists actually argue about, and by the end of this video, you're going to be able to answer it yourself and prove it. Welcome to Biology Blueprint. I'm Manish, and this is Cell Systems Edition, the series that's going to take you from wherever you are right now to walking into your next grade 10 biology test or exam and getting every single mark on that test. In this episode, we're going to be covering the absolute foundation of everything in biology, the 8 characteristics that every single living thing on Earth shares, using a mnemonic your teacher probably gave you, Mr. M.H. Green. And don't worry if that looks like a random jumble of letters right now. By the time we're done, it's going to be permanently stuck in your head. Before we get into the acronym, let's actually answer the virus question I opened with, because it's the best way to understand why these 8 characteristics exist in the first place. A virus can't reproduce on its own. It can do its own metabolism. It basically just floats around as genetic material wrapped in protein until it finds a host cell to hijack. So most scientists actually classify viruses as not alive because they fail almost every single one of the 8 characteristics we're about to learn. Quick flag. This virus comparison is good to know context, but it's not something you need to be memorized for your test. I just think it's the best way to actually understand why these characteristics matter instead of just memorizing a list. So first letter, M, for metabolism. Metabolism is just the chemical reactions happening inside an organism's cells. That's it. Every living thing is constantly running chemical reactions to stay alive. Here's our example organism for this whole video, the paramecium, a single-celled eukaryotic organism, also a protist. That's going to carry us through all 8 letters. For metabolism, the paramecium breaks down nutrients it gets from its environment and uses external organic sources for energy. It's not making its own food, it's breaking down what it eats, just like you do. And here's a connection your teacher wants you to be able to make. Most of these metabolic reactions happen in the cytoplasm and the mitochondria. The cell has enzymes that speed up these reactions, and the ATP made by the mitochondria is what actually fuels them. So, whenever you see the next word metabolism on a test, your brain should immediately jump to mitochondria and ATP. Next letter we have is R for response to stimuli. This means reacting to changes in the outside environment. Our paramecium can actually detect changes in water temperature and it'll move to seek out warmer water. That's a direct response to stimuli. Temperature. On the cell level, this happens because cells have receptor proteins sitting in the cell membrane that detect changes. That signal gets sent through the cytoplasm through what's called a signal transduction pathway, and sometimes the nucleus will even activate certain genes in response. And just like everything else in the cell, this whole signaling process needs ATP to run. And then moving on to our next letter, we have homeostasis. This is the maintenance of stable internal conditions, even when the outside environment is changing around you. The paramecium does this using something called a contractile vacuole. It collects excess water and expels it out through the plasma membrane, which keeps its internal water balance steady. This is called osmoregulation, and it's a perfect, clean example of homeostasis in action. At the cell level overall, it's really the cell membrane doing most of this work, controlling exactly what's allowed to enter and exit, which helps regulate pH, potential of hydrogen, water balance, and internal conditions across the board. And then moving on to the next letter, we have M for movement. So this one's pretty simple, which basically means having control over your position and location. The paramecium is covered in these hair-like structure called cilia, and it uses them to propel itself. For example, swimming towards that warmer water, or what we just talked about in response to stimuli section. See how these two connect? On a cellular level, movement comes from the cytoskeleton, or cilia, or flagella, depending on the cell type. In your muscle cells specifically, movement comes from contraction, and once again, that's powered by ATP, which means adenotriphosphate, meaning it's made in the mitochondria. Then moving on to the next letter, we have G for growth. So cells can increase in size over time, and for organisms made of many cells, growth also means increasing in the actual number of cells. The paramecium enlarges as it eats. And once it hits a certain size threshold, it divides into two daughter cells. At the cell level, growth happens because ribosomes are constantly building new proteins. The DNA in the nucleus is controlling that growth process, and you guessed it, ATP is providing the energy to build all of these new molecules. And then moving on, we have R for reproduction. So, the production of offspring, which can happen sexually or asexually. The pyramecium can actually do both, but asexual reproduction is a way more common and often way for it, specifically through a process called binary fission, where the cell splits into two genetically identical daughter cells. On the cellular side, this connects to mitosis, which we're covering in a later episode, but for now, just know cells divide through mitosis or binary fission. DNA replication happens in the nucleus, and yes, this also requires ATP. And then moving on, we have E for excretion. So this is the removal of metabolic waste. In the paramecium, waste collects in vacuoles, which then moves to something called the anal pore, rupture and release that waste into the environment. Some waste also leaves through that same contractile vacuole we talked about with homeostasis, along with the excess water. At the border cell level, waste like carbon dioxide from respiration leaves through the cell membrane, and vesicles handle removing other types of waste. All of this keeps the cell's internal balance steady. And finally, N for nutrition. This is the intake or production of nutrients. Heterotrophs get their nutrients from outside sources. Autotrophs make their own food using inorganic material. The paramecium is a heterotroph. It uses its cilia to sweep food and water into something called the oral groove, which funnels particles into a gullet, forming a food vacuole. That vacuole then circulates through the cytoplasm, where enzymes break the nutrients down. It's feeding on things like bacteria, algae, and yeast in its environment. And that's it. That's the whole acronym, Mr. MH1. Every single letter you will ever study in this course and how it all connects. No exceptions. So before we wrap things up, two quick definitions that show up constantly on tests and that students lose easy marks on. So first, what does the word theory actually mean? So theory is the strongest or supported explanation, and it has been tested over decades. An example of this is Darwin's theory of evolution by natural selection. It explains how species change over generation through the process of organisms by adapting to their environment, surviving, and reproducing. This is a general definition of theory, but if we look at a biological definition of cell theory, it actually means that there are three types of cell theories that has been given by three scientists. So the first one and the second one have actually been given by two German zoologists, one Matthias Schleiden, who's a German zoologist and botanist, and the other one is Theodor Schwann. So the first one, of course, being all organisms are made up of cells, and the second one is the cell is the basic unit of life. And then there was once this other scientist called Rudolf Virchow thinking there must have been something missing back in the day when this was first created in 1838 and 1939. So he came up with another thing, questioning how cells are actually made. And that's when he realized that he created something called omnis cellula e cellula, which means all cells come from pre-existing cells, which was of course made by Rudolf Virchow. And as you can see on the screen, these are the three beautiful scientists that we could thank for the cell theory. And before I leave you guys, I want to give you guys a few three-marker questions, two actually. So I want you to name three of Mr. M.H. Green and explain how they can be applied in paramecium, and give me the three cell theory statements. And yeah, that's pretty much it. And that's episode done, you guys. And you now officially know more about what makes something alive than most people ever will. In the next episode, we're going inside the cell itself, every organelle, what it does, and a way to remember all of them. That's actually going to stick. If this helped you, subscribe so you don't miss it, and drop a comment with one thing you want me to cover later in the series. I'm reading all of them, and there's a face reveal Q&A at the end of the 18 episode series. And that's when I will answer all the best Q&As and all the worst ones, and I will literally do everything in my way to help you guys to get your best mark possible. So thank you so much. And this is Manish signing off.